The other update for the Zoocoin holders is the second stage. So I really blocked this out in three parts of the update. The first being obviously the wallet and the coin release, talked about that. The second is the exchanges. And I've got to say, and you guys are well aware, as the rest of the planet is well aware of my background, there's absolutely no skeletons left for me to talk about through bankruptcies and government cases and litigation and alligator blood and horses and things. So there's not a lot of my past or history that I need to share with anybody anymore. But one of the things I was surprised, which blew me away actually the last month, was the depth of work required by the team to get the legals and the compliances in place for the listings on an exchange. It absolutely blew me away. I've done, stock exchange listings and corporations, and you have all the government controls that suggest that these things are in place for the benefit of the investors. If that's the level of work and due diligence we had to go through, then there's no argument in terms, from my point, saying that once you're trading crypto, it is an asset class in its own that really, it's got its own foundations, if you like, on the way in which that due diligence is done. So one exchange, for example, it was a massive due diligence legally through the Liechtenstein, through all of the regulations and things to do with the EU. And I've never seen anything like it. So
what I was going to say, it's interesting. Marte's probably got even more insight onto this than me, but having seen a lot of, from my experience, is that it's a bit like, I remember going to the hospital when we had our first child and there was nothing wrong, but we just had to go for a sort of out of schedule visit. And the doctor started going through all these things that could go wrong and basically just reeled off this entire list of all the things that could go wrong with the pregnancy, even though it wasn't going to happen and there was absolutely nothing wrong. And it sort of reminds me of that in terms of, it feels like lawyers now, because they don't really understand what cryptocurrency necessarily is. They don't know how it relates to existing legislation and laws, because it is a new asset class and it is something that governments don't know really how to deal with and the legal fraternity doesn't know how to deal with. So they kind of chuck everything at it and make sure that they don't just tick the boxes. They tick the boxes and then all the other boxes just to cover their own backside, but then also whoever they're representing as well. So it's funny in terms of, I see there being a huge opportunity for crypto-specific law to start to evolve, because right now it feels like, while there are certainly people in this space that are getting a better idea of it and doing good work, it still feels like most lawyers have got, frankly, Buckley's idea of what's actually going on.
And look, Sam, the funny thing about the experiences on that, as I said, I've been enormously involved with the law on all sorts of fronts, but what I didn't anticipate or see was, like you take the EU laws that we've just gone through, people are taking risks by buying Zoocoins, and we make that quite clear. We're putting in 120% to deliver we see as the global vision of competing with Bitcoin and what's going to happen, and the technology can sustain that. But when we looked at the exchange listing, we actually had to stump up 200,000 euros. And I asked the question, well, what happens if we don't get past the law? And there's no refund. So, if you think of risks, that's probably the greatest risk I've seen in a long time. So
yeah, it's wild. So laws don't cross borders very well either. So when you're talking about global decentralized networks, what laws in one jurisdiction, even imagine there's no cryptocurrency. Laws in Europe don't work well with laws in the US or Australia or the UK. There is no global unifying law that covers these sorts of things. I mean, I know the UK and the EU, even just with something like Brexit, the entire financial industry having to deal with just shifting of responsibilities and laws just with traditional finance is an absolute nightmare. And so when you start to talk about globalized financial networks with the peer-to-peer and decentralized, it's mind-blowing just how far off I think some of the legal areas of this
And quite frankly, I think it's going to stay that way, to be honest with you, because technology is being developed so quickly, and there are new things emerging every single day around crypto that regulators are having a hard time to even cover what we talked about a year ago, yet alone for the regulators to get to wrap their head around NFTs. I mean, just think about it. They cannot even regulate, the basic stuff, right? By the time they get to the basic stuff, we already talk about NFT. By the time they get to NFT, we're going to be talking about something else, right? It's just so quick. And there's one thing, and I understand it's a huge pain in the butt in regards to getting listed on exchanges, but the community has to understand that regulators and governments, their best shot, like, okay, let's talk about what they don't like. They don't like crypto, right? We can be honest about that. For sure they don't like it. The easiest way for them to mess with crypto is to regulate and give a hard time to the exchanges, right? Exchanges are really, really amazing on-ramps for newbies. They're also great off-ramps for anyone who is willing to, sell their crypto and go back into fiat or even stable coins. Okay, today I'm not going to talk about, decentralized exchanges and whatnot, because that just makes things even more complicated. But if governments wants to mess and regulate crypto, they're going to go after the exchanges, because that's the easiest way for them to slow down, this carriage. That's the easiest way. And thus exchanges are really have lawyered up and really trying to make everything super, rock solid, from AML to KYC and listing coins and whatnot. And I think on one hand it's a good thing, on another hand it really goes against what I really signed up for back in 2013. I mean, I still remember some of the exchanges I dealt with, like BTCE, right? I signed up. They didn't ask for my address. They didn't ask for, how big my feet is, like all this kind of nonsense. They're just like, yeah, sign up. Here's your Bitcoin
email and that'll
address, right? And your limit is, I don't know what my limit was, but it was fairly big back in 2013 on BTC. And I even remember about Mt. Gox, like. And then they started to slowly roll out all these crazy regulations and AMLs and KYCs that's just making everyone's lives more difficult. But the fact of the matter is they're doing it because they don't want to get shut down. And if you think about it from that way, this is what they have to do. And once we get with ZooCoins, once we get listed on those exchanges, I think it's going to be a really, really great feedback for the community that we have ticked those boxes as well.
Well, and just
multiple exchanges.
Yeah, and coming into that, then, Mate, the good news is for the early adopters is that, having gone through that exercise, I'm pleased to. I won't say the exchanges because I've been told not to. I have to do as I'm told. I get carried away and excited with this stuff, but I can say that, as you guys are aware, we've got 2 of the top 20 exchanges on board as a result of going through this process. We've got 2 of the top 40, an additional, and another one just outside of that. So that's 5 exchanges that will be fantastic for everybody as we start to look in July. Now that we're through these hurdles, the next part obviously is the APIs and integration. So there's a bit of lag there, but that'll happen. I think with the exchanges, one of the things we were doing is not only in the background while all of the legal due diligence was taking place, the team here were also experimenting with the ease of the on and off ramps that you mentioned, Mate. And the good news is that we dropped a few of the bigger exchanges because that experience was terrible. So, from our point of view, what we're saying to people is that you've got to have a relationship that says to the exchange, we'll do all the heavy lifting on the API. If a new person comes in and buys a Zoocoin, literally they can put their order in, they can press a buy button, they take the money off their debit or credit card instantly, and instantly the API reflects on the transfer from peer to peer, and you suddenly receive an SMS while you're looking at the screen with a link that you press that button, and 2 presses, you've now got the wallet and the coin you've just bought online. So there was a bit of work to do as we teased our way through this whole new dynamic, because normally what happens is you've got an exchange that wants the overload of stuff at the beginning. You've got confusion with your pairings. We're trying to mass generate this to a point of the person in the street says, I've got $100 I want to convert that and buy a Zoocoin, and I need to know it's in my wallet, in my hands. So I'm excited that that's happened. What I can say is that because of all of this work that's happened, both on those fronts, we're actually ticked the box that is the dream boxes that I've wanted, and that is that there is 2 coins in the world, as far as I'm concerned, that satisfy that true, as Bitcoin not being a security, not falling within the Howey tests in America, and not falling within the EU laws in terms of e-money and financial instruments, and in Asia and so on, as a financial product. So there's a whole raft of definitions globally, but they all sort of circle in to the same point. And for me, one of the top exchanges, and by the way, Mate, one of the exchanges close to your heart, so I'm not going to give away the name, but you know what it is. Those boys were sensational with some of the interface things that they're going to do for us as well, which will flow to the other ones. And we've had some amazing discussions the last few nights on how that's going to work for everybody. But I just want to read the conclusion to the European advice, which no doubt the team will send those. I don't know whether you've received them already or not, and there's a Singapore one coming as well. But this sort of got my attention, and it simply states for all of the coin holders that, in summary, in consideration of all the assumptions we've made and a full assessment carried out on ZKZ, Zoocoins, it is our professional opinion that ZKZ does neither classify as a financial instrument or electronic money under the European laws. Accordingly, and additionally, the ESMA and EBA token taxonomy, it would be considered a hybrid payment utility token, hence further confirming that ZKZ is falling outside the entire scope of all applicable traditional EU legislative frameworks as indicated in the same paragraph. Now that is very, very powerful for what we wanted to achieve on a level pegging with Bitcoin, that this is a free coin that's going to change our lives, as to the technology that's behind it. So I just thought I'd share that with everybody, and eventually I will get approval that we can post that and get that advices up for everyone to see. So I think that covers off now where I wanted to be with the exchanges and what's going to happen through July. And I guess the final one before we lead into some sort of general stuff that I wanted to raise is that it's all about the team working behind the scenes now through the Zoocaz ecosystem. And interestingly, from Australian Zoocoin holders, there's a bit of a conference coming up on the 24th in Queensland, and there's some very high-level accountants involved in that one. And we've been going through how exciting it is for Australian coin holders generally, because under our laws, we have it as long as you hold it for 12 months. You've got the CGT exemption there. It's only CGT tax at 24 cents in the dollar. So if you're making millions, just work on 24 cents. Don't worry about the level of your income. Whether you've got $10 as income or you've got 100,000, the result will be close to the same. And importantly, the Zoocaz ecosystem, which I know that got your attention, Mate, because you're all about well and truly into the future. You're beyond just trading the thing. You're beyond the value inherent in a coin. You want the fraction to be used to go and buy that hamburger, to create that real value in the hands of the merchant in real time without it fluctuating the way in which that works. The pressure's on the consumer to convert. But Australian people have wonderful news. There's a public ruling that if we allow the coins, which we will, to be directly used into the hands of merchants for goods and services. There is no tax at all under $10,000. And that's a fairly powerful level of transaction. If you think about meals and buying tyres for the car and paying, even rent. I think, Mate, this is where I wanted to lead into you now, is how you've grabbed onto this for the big picture of mass market, mass adoption, mass usage within a consumer merchant relationship. That's how you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me go back a little bit in the history books, because when I first started to talk about Bitcoin for my friends in 2013, they were like, yeah, it's interesting, but their first question was, what can I do with it? What can I buy with it? Because back in 2013, people who were not really already hooked on Bitcoin and understood the fundamentals, they didn't quite think how I thought that Bitcoin would worth a lot of money at some point, right? We all know that, if you believe in Bitcoin, its value is going to go up just because of the fundamentals. But, now even more because of what's going on in the world and how inflation is happening, and how the stimulus packages are happening, especially in the US, also in Europe. People are starting to, understand why its value is going up. However, back in 2013, their first question was, well, great, what can I buy with it? And that was the big question. And when we first met, Alan, and you told me about Zookaz, I was really, really excited, because I'm all about, use cases. I'm all about what it can do for the world. Because don't get me wrong, I love Bitcoin, but Bitcoin has transferred into a digital gold, right? And I wish the best of luck for anyone who thinks that the second layer solutions and the Lightning Network is going to work, right? And maybe it will, but it's a really, really long way ahead. And I want to live in the moment, in this second. And right now, what we need throughput capacity. We need tens and hundreds of millions of people to be able to use it, and to be able to transact with it, and to be able to use it as money, right? And or to use it as a utility, and be able to get something done with it. And I think the Zookaz ecosystem is going to deliver just that, and people are going to be able to use Zook coins and get extra benefits using it. And that's really what got really my attention. And we all care about different things. I think Sam is a lot more into the technology, because he understands technology a lot more. Just like he said, he's a nerd, which is great. I'm much more about utility and use cases. Technology is important, don't get me wrong, but just like I said, the average Joe cares about what he can do with it and not how it works. And that's why I'm so excited about the Zookaz ecosystem, and how people are going to be able to use the coins real soon. So.
And Mate, just on that then with the Zookaz, I recall that you another exciting point that you latched onto was the fact that we built this competing augmented reality ecosystem that's taking on Google and Facebook and Instagram, the way in which that business model is designed, that there's no upfront advertising. It's a success-driven business where you've got redemptions and you've got trading. You're still excited about the fact that the more the merchants conduct those transactions, and the more the consumers are conducting them, and the fees that they're paying, that there's that filter that pushes that 20% directly from merchant consumer into the coin itself through the smart contract. That was another big tick item that created a flaw in the coin, not just some sort of value proposition.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. It has to have that benefit, right? People have to look forward to get something, and I think it's a huge part of it.
Yep. And Sam, you had a lot more to do with the augmented reality, a lot of the testing that we were doing in Geelong and Albury, and how that's, the COVID sort of gave the Zukaz team an opportunity to reinvent itself with e-commerce as well and some of the technology. But that was always something that captured your imagination, the way in which you can have the three-dimensional forms and then build into our own NFTs, if you like, for collectible trading.
Yeah, I mean, so Marte's kind of right. I kind of come at it from a technology perspective first and then expand out from there. And it was that combination of, I really like what the Zukaz app was doing with augmented reality and how people can interact with the digital and physical worlds in a seamless way. And that's something, again, I've been, writing about for a number of years, is this progression we have where our physical and digital worlds are converging. And something like augmented reality and how we use that through our smartphones and how we use that to interact with merchants and businesses and advertising. I think that's a trend that we're going to see continue for a very, very long time. And so I really got excited about what Zukaz was doing, and then the integration of ZooCoins with that, and how there can be utility within this ecosystem of ZooCoins with Zukaz and merchants and partners within that ecosystem. And as Mate said, you can then when you start to be able to fractionalize a ZooCoin down to effectively infinitesimal places, then it has that utility. And then, you can get that hamburger, you can get that coffee or whatever it might be. So it has real world function, but it also really latches onto two of, what I see as being the biggest trends that we're going to see over the next, 50 to 100 years, is this convergence of physical and digital, and then the explosion of digital assets and cryptocurrencies and peer-to-peer networks as transaction and monetary networks.
Yep. Well, what I thought to wrap things up, guys, and it's an amazing combo having the tech head and the visionaries on the marketing side. Mate, that really helps the Zukaz ZooCoin team. So part of the reason we're so excited you guys being on board. What I thought I'd do to wrap up is I've identified 6 key points that the great Elon Musk, the elephant in the room, made in relation to crypto. There's been a lot written about it. There's a lot of those that are positive, negative in relation to the power he has on his tweets. But I think if you step back a bit and you think about, the direction and what he's trying to achieve, I guess, you don't throw $1.5 billion up in the air and hope it all lands. There's got to be more to play than that. And certainly there's more to come, no doubt. But what I thought I'd do is see if I can get an answer. I'll ask you both individually. There's six questions that I've identified in his latest media, which related to the concerns he expressed of obviously the starting point being the environmental issues with Bitcoin. So if you first, Sam, and the response would be whether or not ZooCoins can deliver an outcome based on the concerns he expressed in the question.
Okay.
So the first one for you, Sam, one, he had that he needs a crypto that's environmentally friendly. How do you see ZooCoins sitting into that picture?
Yeah, well, I mean, it absolutely ticks that box, just the underlying split chain technology and the fragmented nature of the data and how it gets shared amongst phones. It requires, the more it scales, the even more efficient it becomes, but there's virtually no energy imprint of ZooCoins in that respect.
That leads into your question, Mate. The second one was the capacity for scalability.
Yeah, so just like I said, the reason why I'm so excited about ZooCoins is because it can scale, and that's a big problem with Bitcoin. And you have this great news about Bitcoin becoming a legal tender in El Salvador, but no one is talking about, well, what happens if every single people in El Salvador are going to start using it, right? The network isn't going to be able to handle it, and it was great to see that that Elon added the Bitcoin payment to buying Teslas. But again, I think the transaction fees and the slow confirmation times and whatnot isn't making it viable for a usable medium of exchange. So ZooCoins definitely ticks that box.
Sam, this one really hones in on an area of interest to you, which is the problem he had was the third question being to decrease the block processing times by a factor of 10.
Yeah, well, look, as Mate said as well, you know, with something like Bitcoin, just how the consensus mechanism works is it takes time to verify transactions in a block, and then all of a sudden, if those transactions scale up to however many millions of people in El Salvador and then other countries, and then all of a sudden you're starting to talk about hundreds of millions of people, there's going to be some speed and processing issues there. Zoocoins is, you know, from all my testing is instant. So you kind of tick that box straight away.
And Sam, with that concern that Elon has in relation to that, I read the other day that the one way around it was they're looking at Taproot, which you'd be aware of in terms of trying to get the miners together to, change the nature of the blockchain process, if you like, in general terms. What concerned me about that was, and I wonder if it's the same concern you may have, is how quickly the miners got together to be able to create that fundamental change, which is well and truly beyond what Satoshi had envisaged. If they can do that, then there's nothing in the future to stop them from centralizing more of the decentralized concepts, is there?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's an interesting one. There's, and I'm sure Mate has some views on this as well, is the mining in Bitcoin is, it's I wouldn't say it's centralized, but it's probably not as decentralized as was originally envisaged. I remember going all the way back when you could mine it on a PC with a single GPU. I think that was the original vision, is that you would have, everyone would be able to, you know, run a PC with a GPU and mine Bitcoin. And then all of a sudden, you know, the development of ASICs and then mining farms, and, you know, all of a sudden the mining became such an economic output that it really concentrated into those that could put together the resources and then access the super cheap energy. And now you've just got these big sort of, there's only a handful of really big miners that do most of the blocks on Bitcoin. There are other blockchains that are looking at other outcomes to that and problems to solve with that as well. But yeah, look, the thing about Zoocoin is the more it scales and the more decentralized it is, the more robust and the more secure and the more efficient the entire network becomes. That doesn't necessarily happen with something like Bitcoin.
Mate, the interesting next question that he had was that his thought was to increase the block size tenfold. Now, we're actually reducing. Yeah, by doing that, your thoughts on that's just going to make it even harder, isn't it? If you're trying to do that, whereas we've got data fragmentation in the hands of the peers, there is actually no need for the block at all. But increasing the block size by 10 in order to cope with this, processing capability.
It's funny, and Sam has been in the space for long enough. I mean, he has seen the crazy block size debate that we had. Roger got really involved with the block size debate, and going from Bitcoin Jesus to someone who people say, well, Roger veers all against Bitcoin now and whatnot. He hasn't changed a tiny bit. His vision is still the same. His vision is the same as the vision that Satoshi had, because if you look at the title of the Bitcoin white paper, says peer-to-peer electronic cash system, not peer-to-peer electronic gold, right? The reason why Satoshi eventually put in the block size limit back in the early days, because back in the early days you didn't have so many transactions and he didn't want people to spam the network, right? And I was around when people were debating about raising the block size, and we were actually just talking about raising the block size from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes, not from 1 megabyte to 10 megabytes. Think about it. We could not even, when by I mean the community, back when we had the New York Agreement, the community were not able to even pull that off, from going from 1 megabyte to 2 megabytes, yet alone going from 1 megabyte to 10 megabytes, right? It's just simply not going to happen. at this point, right? You know, it's just the only way it will work is if second layer solutions will work. I don't see any way for you know for the community to be able to come and have consensus over changing the block size, you know, higher.
Yep.
So I think it's for Bitcoin, it's just not gonna happen. Let's just put it that way.
That's the huge advantage by the data fragmentation in the individual hands of each peer. You don't have that issue, and certainly leads into my his next question, Sam, that he had. And I've only got 2 to go, but certainly he said that we need something that's going to have 100 times the transaction volume capability. Well, I mean, that's not going to happen if they don't get consensus to sort that out. Even with
I mean, I think I agree with Mate, is that the only way that Bitcoin becomes an efficient payment system is layer 2 and then layer 3 solutions even with that. So you just don't know how that, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I don't know how that plays out, but something like Zoocoins solves that straight away. And like we said, you know, we've talked about a few times with a lot of the answers is when you look at the way that split chain works and the data fragmentation and the fact that it is pure peer-to-peer with, you know, very low, you know, energy input, but really high throughput, a lot of, you know, able to handle a lot of transactions instantaneously, that becomes a very efficient payment network and transfer network. And so the more that it scales and the more robust the network becomes, the better that becomes as well.
Yep.
It's important to point out, though, that now that so the block size debate have calmed down a little bit in the past, I guess, year or two. But you know, now that Elon Musk is bringing it up again, I think a lot of attention is gonna go to other coins that are, you know, capable of delivering that, right? So we talk about Zoocoins, we talk about Bitcoin Cash, we talk about Ethereum, actually also now eventually going through the same problem like Bitcoin did, but you know, they're really working hard to fix it, and once they will, then it's gonna become really efficient. We can talk about all the other blockchains like Cardano, like Polkadot, and all those others. And now every project who are working on a blockchain understand that, you know, it needs to be super efficient and super fast, and the throughput capacity has to be there. And I think the competition is actually really big out there. And Elon Musk has definitely pointed you know, people's attention to that problem.
Well, his last, in order to create the cryptocurrency of the planet, was that the final box that he wanted answered or ticked was that it had to be 100 times lower in terms of transaction fees. So I think Zero would tick that box for Zoocoins, would it not, with the fractions?
Yeah,
certainly.
I'm pretty sure that answers his problem. I remember using Uniswap in I think it was April on the Ethereum network, and I think with the gas fees, a transaction was somewhere in the vicinity of about $250 to make a transaction on Uniswap. So that was a transaction fee on Ethereum. That's how much a transaction fee cost to interact with a decentralized exchange on Ethereum. Now, if you're somebody that, you know, only has $100 to put into crypto, you can't use that network because you can't have $100 to go and you know, transact with the crypto, and the transaction fee is going to cost you $250. I mean, that's an unusable network. And in April, Ethereum was unusable, and unless you had a shit ton of money, Ethereum was unusable. That's not how these networks are supposed to work. That is not what these things are supposed to do. So yeah, zero transaction fees. That's what you need. And if you can do that, which Zoocoins does, then that solves that problem pretty easily.
Well, I thought then to wrap up from the Elon Musk, you know, queries that he's put out there, I spoke to Robert and I said, now, Robert, how do all these geniuses come up with these terms? You know, you've got a miner and nodes and, you know, proof of work and white paper, and where did that all, how do these things evolve? And he said, look, someone gets a light bulb appears above their head, and they come up with a term, and it gets adopted.
Or they're drunk on a forum and they mistype a word and it becomes gospel for the next decade and beyond.
Well, hold for example, yeah. So I said to Robert, well, why can't we create our own term, and let's announce this tonight, guys, that whether it makes sense or not doesn't really matter. It's our term. So so I'm trying to explain to people that the first thing you have in general terms, you've got proof of work, which is inherent in the Bitcoin blockchain. You've got the working team of miners getting together on their computers and beavering away at adding things to the block. And that's the workload, if you like, of proof of work. So that makes sense. Then you've got the Ethereum world of all running around and throwing a few dollars or putting a stake up that says that my stake's better than yours, and I'm going to be, a far greater leader in terms of the way in which that process happens. So we'll call that proof of stake. So I said to Robert, are you happy if I announce that we're going to call all the little peers running around and they're doing their own thing, which covers off on all of those queries that Elon has asked in terms of what a good coin looks like or should be like. So we're going to call it proof of peers. Proof of peers. How does that sound, Mate? You happy with that?
I like the sound of it.
It'll grow on you guys, I'm sure. But essentially, we're just saying that it's got absolutely nothing to do with anything else other than the peers themselves that are in control of the entire process, the validation, the transfers. It's the protocol that's behind the scenes, and certainly we're going to put that power back in the peers. So that's the term we'll use for our Zoocoin holders, that it's the peers that are making it happen. They are making it happen. So, look, I think I'll leave it on that note. It's been a long, long podcast, guys, and some people might get to the very end. If they don't get to the very end, then it won't hurt us if we throw out some predictions on Zoocoins. I can tell you that it took a bit of work, guys, but the API, which has a couple of little ingenious little mechanisms in it that the exchanges have accepted, it triggers that when you go to buy or sell, it'll do a posting request, and that posting request, if certain values don't meet the minimum of 60, then it won't post on the exchange. So that's how that's going to work. And if you go to sell or buy, it'll do a buy or sell request through the API, and if it doesn't meet that minimum, it won't do a sale at $60 either. So there's the flaw. And I guess, Mate, start with you. 6 months from now, with where you see what you want to build out, what's your prediction you're thinking of the Zoocoin?
Oh, you mean price prediction?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm really careful with price predictions because it can, once you say something on the internet, it can never get down. So, let me just say this: I think it's definitely going to be a lot more than $60.
Yeah, that's a safe answer. I like that. Sam, you're a bit more radical than that. Your book talks about some big numbers. I recall hundreds of thousands of dollars towards the end if these problems were solved. So if we can tick those Elon Musk queries, which I'm sure we've done, what are you thinking?
In the 2 years or so that you've known me, Alan, have I ever made a price prediction on Zoocoins or advised that I would make a price prediction on it? No,
not at all. You want to do the safe one above 60 based on the floor as well?
You'll get the same answer you got from me for the last 2 years. I don't worry about the price with this. I worry about things like making sure that it passes the grandma test, so that grandma can come and use the app and transact in Zoocoin, that merchants can understand how it works and adopt it, that people can see how it works, see the ease at which it can work, the split chain system behind it, and building out that network, and everything else will take care of itself if we can achieve all the things that it's out to achieve. And down the track, and we haven't even scratched the surface in this podcast, but talking about, NFTs and virtual real estate and some of the things that are possible with these sorts of networks down the track, those sorts of things take care of themselves. So, me, I'm not going to make any price predictions.
No, that's perfect, Sam. And I think I've been trying to say to people as well, as an ex-accountant, I, for the life of me, can't work out why Bitcoin's at 37,000 US. So I have no idea. Other than, you circle back to there's a supply and demand. The good thing about crypto is we all know we're not printing US dollars and flooding the money with quantitative easing if you've got your locked in coins. So there is some support for that based on supply and demand. So time will tell. And if we can deliver the combination that both you and Mate want, and Grandma is using our coin, then it would be a delight. And I can't thank you guys for being on board, going through the journey and taking the time for this podcast for everybody to share.
That's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Sam. Thanks, Mate.
Pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Cheers.